The outpouring of the Spirit of truth. On the afternoon of Pentecost, around 1 o'clock, as the 120 believers were in prayer, they all became aware of a strange presence. They felt an unfamiliar yet profound sense of spiritual joy. Though they'd never experienced it before, it felt safe and familiar. This new awareness of spiritual power sparked a strong impulse within them to go out and proclaim the gospel of the kingdom and the good news that Jesus had risen from the dead. Peter was the first to put words to it, declaring that this must be the arrival of the Spirit of truth, which Jesus had so emphatically promised them. He suggested they go to the temple to share the good news. All fear had fallen away, and filled with renewed spiritual strength, they set off for the temple. The apostles and disciples had been trained and thoroughly instructed by Jesus to preach a message that revealed God as a father to humanity. But in this moment of spiritual ecstasy, they forgot that message. So relieved were they to feel the truth alive within them that they marched out as victors. It was a personal triumph. They were right, and at that moment, that was all that mattered. The greatest news wasn't Jesus' message, but the fact that he had risen from the dead and triumphed. And so, endowed with power from on high, they went out to preach the glad tidings to the people. Yet unintentionally, they made the mistake of substituting certain facts connected to the gospel for the gospel message itself. Without realizing it, Peter led this error, and others followed him until years later, Paul crafted a new religion from this altered version of the good news. The gospel of the kingdom is this: the fact of God's fatherhood paired with the connected truth of the brotherhood of God's children. However, the Christianity that has developed since this Pentecost shifted the focus to the conquered death and the risen, glorified Christ. It's not surprising that these people, filled with the outpoured Spirit, seized this chance to express their feelings of triumph in their vindication, triumph over the powers that had tried to kill their master and end his message's influence. In a moment like this, it was natural for them to think first of their personal bond with Jesus, swept up in the certainty that the Master still lived, that their friendship hadn't ended, and that the Spirit had indeed come upon them, just as he'd promised. These believers suddenly felt transported to another world, a new existence of joy, power, and glory. Jesus had told them the kingdom would come with power, and some of them thought they were beginning to understand what he'd meant. Consider that the wonder-working Jesus was still fresh in the Jewish collective memory, and you'll see why these people began preaching a new gospel about Jesus instead of their earlier message of God's fatherhood and human brotherhood. For weeks, the apostles had been in hiding. This day was the Jewish Pentecost, and thousands of pilgrims from across the known world were in Jerusalem. Now, after weeks of seclusion, these once fearful apostles emerged and boldly appeared in the temple, where they began preaching the new message of a risen Messiah. Around 2 o'clock that afternoon, Peter stood in the same spot on the temple courtyard where Jesus had taught the people of Jerusalem just a few weeks ago, after he had cleansed the temple. Here Peter delivered his memorable sermon, making a passionate appeal to his listeners that won over more than 2,000 souls. The Master was gone, but they suddenly discovered that this story about him had a powerful impact on people. No wonder they went on from Pentecost proclaiming what fueled their loyalty to Jesus and what compelled people so strongly to believe in him. 6 of the apostles took part in this preaching on the temple grounds: Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, and Matthew. They preached for over an hour and a half, delivering their message in Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic, even tossing in a few words from other languages they could somewhat speak. The Jewish leaders were stunned by the apostles' boldness, but they didn't dare interfere because of the large crowd listening intently. By 4:30 that afternoon, more than 2,000 new believers followed the apostles to the Siloam pool, where they were baptized in Jesus' name. It was already dark by the time they finished baptizing all these people. Pentecost was the great festival when proselytes, non-Jews who wished to serve Yahweh, could be welcomed into the Jewish community. This made it all the easier for large numbers of Jews and believing Gentiles to be baptized on this day. In doing so, they didn't break from the Jewish faith. At first, the community of Jesus believers formed a sect within Judaism. They all, including the apostles, remained loyal to the essential requirements of the Jewish ceremonial system.